It's a beautiful morning.
Good morning. I'm Heather Houston, Executive Director of Scenic Houston. That video we just saw was incredible. Thank you to Nelson Bird Woltz for letting us use that this morning. And just a quick housekeeping item before we get started. If you'll please turn your view to speaker view instead of gallery view. We have a really great presentation this morning and it will make your viewing experience a lot better if you'll do that. So thank you. We are thrilled to have you join us this morning for our third installment of Scenic Mornings. We created these events during the COVID lockdown as a way to connect with scenic-minded folks like you, but we've enjoyed them so much that we've decided to make these a regular quarterly celebration. And we are very excited about our talk this morning, A Stroll Through Memorial Park. For all of us that love Memorial Park and love all that it has to offer, I know it will be a really great, exciting insider look into what is happening with the master plan. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this morning's event, C3 Building Solutions, Mad Rat Beverages, and Vision Property Works. Thanks to them, we are able to continue to offer these events at no cost to all of you today. I'm really excited to introduce our wonderful moderator for today, Ms. Sarah Newberry. Sarah received her Bachelor of Arts from Yale University and holds dual master degrees in architecture and landscape architecture from Harvard's Graduate School of Design. In 2013, Sarah joined Uptown Houston and worked in concert with their partners, the Memorial Park Conservancy and Houston Parks and Recreation Department, to help shepherd the master planning process for Memorial Park. In 2018, Sarah joined the Kinder Foundation, where she serves as Director of Parks and Green Space, coordinating partnerships and leading initiatives related to the Kinder Foundation's park projects. I've always thought Sarah had one of the coolest jobs in Houston, and we are really honored to have her with us today. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I have really enjoyed Scenic Houston's past programs, and I'm so glad to be here with everyone this morning. I do love my job, and I feel so fortunate to be part of the larger team working together for Memorial Park. As you will hear during the presentation today, the 2011-12 drought catalyzed a renewed commitment to Memorial Park from both private and public sectors. The Memorial Park Conservancy, the Mayor's Office, the Uptown Development Authority all stepped up to identify resources and to create a plan, not only to restore Memorial Park, but to fully realize the potential Memorial Park holds for Houston. It's really hard to believe that it's been 8 years since that time when everything got started, and to realize how much is already underway in the park today. And there are two incredible people who have held central roles really in bringing this all about and getting us to this point. And those are our panelists today, Shelley Arnold and Thomas Woltz. And I am very honored to introduce both of them. Shelley Arnold joined Memorial Park Conservancy as CEO in 2013 to lead the transformative work for the Conservancy. She brought 20 years of corporate turnaround and startup experience to her role, having worked at McKinsey & Company, Compaq Computer Corporation, Hewlett-Packard, and Cisco Systems, all in leadership roles. Shelley was on the panel that selected Nelson Bird Woltz, and she and her partners at the Parks Department and Uptown Houston worked closely with Nelson Bird Woltz to deliver what you will hear about today, a bold, award-winning master plan for Memorial Park that will not only transform the park, but also help transform Houston. Shelley is a native Houstonian and is proud to be a part of this project and on this team of collaborators. Thomas Woltz is the principal and owner of Nelson Bird Woltz Landscape Architects, whom we lovingly call NBW, with offices in Charlottesville, Virginia, New York City, and here in Houston, Texas. The primary focus of Thomas and his firm is on public landscapes, urban and wilderness parks, botanic gardens and arboreta, the lands that support the mission of cultural institutions. The firm's research-based approach inspires contemporary designs that integrate the beauty and function of built forms with an understanding of complex biological systems and deep histories Over the past 2 decades of practice, Thomas and his team have infused narratives of the land into the places where people live, work, and play, engendering stewardship and inspiring connections between people and the natural world. Bowles was educated at the University of Virginia and holds master's degrees in landscape architecture and architecture. And he was recently awarded a PhD honoris causa from the State University of New York, Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, and was also recognized with the Land for the People Award by the Trust for Public Land in 2009, and as one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company in 2017. Woltz currently serves on the board of directors of the Cultural Landscape Foundation. Shelley and Thomas, I know you have a great presentation on the master plan and our current projects, and I look forward to receiving questions from our viewers for our Q&A afterwards. So all of you who are watching, please, during the presentation, feel free to jot down any questions and send them via email to hello@scenichouston.org. That's hello@scenichouston.org. And that way I can be sure to include them in our question and answer afterwards. I think Shelley will also mention that email again for any late joiners after her portion of the presentation. So Shelley, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you both for joining.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for having us this morning. It's really exciting to be here. It's exciting to be able to share what we're doing with Houstonians who care deeply about Houston and Houston's future. And let me start by saying Sarah has been with this project before any of us were, and she helped identify Nelson Bird Woltz and helped identify the potential for bringing us together for Nelson Bird Woltz to work on this project with us. And I was on the panel that we interviewed only the world's leading landscape architects and selected Nelson Bird Woltz because of their research-based approach, their approach to listening, researching, and really understanding even the future and how the land tells the stories of Houston or of the place they're working. And even doing all this even before picking up a proverbial pencil to begin design. And I'll explain that process to you. And then Thomas will take you through where we are with the projects and the plan itself. But for context, Memorial Park, which you're seeing here in the dark green, is Houston's largest urban park. It's significant locally and it's significant nationally. It's significant for the same reasons, for the most part, locally and nationally. It's a centrally located, enormous space. And the word, the size, almost twice as big as Central Park. Central Park are the rectangles that are overlaid in this kind of light, kind of yellow color, almost twice the size of Central Park, right in the heart of the city. That is also an urban wilderness composition. Any of those things are unusual, but the combination is highly unusual. And it's also, Houston's largest virtually free public health asset. If you think about Memorial Park, the physical nature in which people engage running or just nature bathing, which is a very important, getting out in nature is important for your physical being as well as your spiritual and emotional well-being. This is also important. The park, it's unique locally and nationally because of its role in World War I as one of a handful of training camps that were used to convert soldiers from National Guard to become U.S. Army soldiers. And it is the only one that remains, that has archaeological features that have not been paved over. And so as part of what we'll talk about and what we'll do in the master plan, we'll tell these stories of Camp Logan, and we'll tell the stories of great valor and great heroism and the stories of great tragedy and injustice. All these stories will be told as we unveil the master plan as part of Houston's cultural history. Some of the work that we did, this is an example of research that we did on the soils and soil sampling and testing and digs. And this was something that the Woltz team found through our, our soil scientists, that the prairie, that first of all, Memorial Park was not a virgin pine forest, as many people mistakenly think. It was a native Gulf Coast prairie, much like all of Houston. And it was also managed by Native Americans. The indigenous peoples were the first peoples to live in the area, and they managed through controlled burns. And they found evidence of controlled burns during the research work that we conducted together. We also found that Memorial Park fit in as an important part of a 1912 plan that was done by James Comey, who was a city engineer. And this was a linear parks along bios that today is actually being realized by the Houston Parks Board in conjunction with the Parks Department. The creation of trails along bios in a linear park system. Memorial Park was part of that to begin with in 1912. We also found that there was an original master plan for Memorial Park done in the 1930s, and it was partially implemented, but never fully implemented. And this was the original master plan. If you see the footprint here, but you see again, Buffalo Bio bordering on the south, but the western and southern parts of the park were intended to be nature, urban wilderness, trail-based. The golf course, which was part of Camp Logan as a 9-hole golf course, was intended to be here, which is where it is. And then the ball fields, which sprung up ultimately all over the place, were intended, all the active recreation like ball fields were intended to be in the northeast quadrant of the park. And this plan was never fully realized as roads and ball fields and all kinds of use sprung up all over the place in the park. So when the drought happened, the catalyst that Sarah mentioned, it really was a catalyst for renewed commitment to the park, both from the private sector and public sector. And part of the research that Sarah led when she was at Uptown Houston was to understand who comes to the park. The Parks Department had done some work to let us know that about 4 million people come annually, but where are they coming from? It was the question. And we found that they really are coming from all over Houston, from over 170 zip codes. And when you consider nationally, it's well over 170, but regionally, from Atascocita, from Clear Lake, from Kingwood, people come to Memorial Park, and they come for so many reasons. They come to exercise, or they just come to a park, but they stay and they come again, and they come to cure their addictions or cure their cancer, or heal themselves, or find community or find spirituality. We find people coming over the course of their lifetimes, and this becomes one of the most important places that they visit, like their work or like their church, or it's just one of the most important places in many Houstonians' lives over time. And so the drought, I mentioned, renewed a commitment. The Conservancy stepped up at that time. The mayor stepped up at that time. Uptown Houston, the Parks Department, everyone stepped up at this painful site and said, we have to do something different than we've been doing. And so we began the process where we did select at this time in 2013, Nelson Bird Waltz, for the reasons I explained, to be the leaders of the master plan, the design firm, the landscape architecture firm, to lead the process. And we started with public engagement, with extensive public engagement. We had 8 public meetings, 20 workshops all over town. We had a 3-month online survey. And in the end, over 3,000 Houstonians participated in sharing with us what's special to them about Memorial Park and what they want. And so that was a really important part of informing the future master plan. So that process began in 2013. We also brought in 25 ecological scientists, most of whom were volunteers. They were called our Ecotech panel. They were the best of the best in their fields. And so we selected people carefully. With the Sierra Club helped us with this, soil scientists, water quality experts, bug people, frog people, and foresters, prairie experts. A number of folks served with us for years, again, to inform the master plan and design. We brought in stormwater management experts to help understand how Memorial Park could better function as a 1,500 acre sponge, how it could better serve not just the park, but Houston in terms of managing the stormwater that regularly ravages Houston. We found that the park was divided into 25 different pieces through the railroad, roads, ball fields, parking lots. How could we join the park together again? How could we stitch it back together? And how could we join Memorial Park to the other parks and green spaces in Houston? And then what could we do about the problem of the ecology? So we found soil structures that needed repair, soil nutrient deficient soils that couldn't sustain life in a healthy way. What could we do? Well, one thing we did was we took 40,000 trees that had died from the drought and created new soil. We created new life and started a composting operation with these trees. And these are just a few of the findings. Other things that we heard from Houstonians in the survey, for example, they wanted better access to other parts of the park. They wanted a safe crossing across Memorial Drive. They wanted their park just to be better, their thing to be better. They wanted restrooms, they wanted parking. And so let me stop and hand it to Thomas to talk about the plan that emerged from this research and listening process. Thomas, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and good morning, friends in Houston. It's an honor to be here, and I have to say it has been the honor of my career to lead the design team on this incredible project. It has been the perfect convergence of political goodwill, philanthropic generosity, and design excellence in response to an ecological disaster. Next slide, please. This drought that Shelley just covered really opened everyone's eyes to the fact that we had to take action. And so the master plan process, as Shelley has described it, was one that our firm took 2 years to generate this plan. The first year was listening, and the second year was designing. And we had this ecotech panel that were instrumental in helping us understand the ecology of the site, but also these cultural threads, because what we wanted to create here was something that belonged only to Houston. With every public park that Nelson Bird Woltz Landscape Architects envisions, we seek the authenticity of your site, of your city, of your park, and bring that forward both ecologically and culturally. So the story of Camp Logan, the story of the Karankawa Native peoples, the story of Houston's growth and expansion, the highways, all of these are influences within the plan. Next, please. The perfect convergence, I have to say, was something I've rarely experienced in my 24 years of landscape architecture, where the Memorial Park Conservancy has been incredibly capable at raising funds, and the people of Houston extraordinarily generous. So at $55 million raised by the Conservancy, the $70 million lead gift by the Kinder Foundation to inspire and activate the 10-year plan, the vision of Uptown Houston. And I have to say, it's incredible to have so many clients who were trained as landscape architects, like John Breeden leading Uptown and Sarah Newberry, were amazing sounding boards because they understood landscape architecture as a powerful tool for response to the droughts and floods that could face this public landscape. And they both cared about design excellence as the result. And then with Houston Parks and Recreation Department, starting with Anise Parker and carried on with Mayor Turner it's been an extraordinary degree of support politically. So the next projects that are on deck are memorial groves, which will recall this history of Camp Logan, a north-south connector trail to bring greater connectivity within and outside the park, the west connector trail that will get us to the uptown Houston neighborhood, the southern arc trail, which is basically a series of boardwalks and trails along the bayou, and then the East Pedestrian Bridge, which will accomplish sort of what the Land Bridge and Prairie that I'm going to talk about today. So those are upcoming projects, but now let's dive into what's going on now, some of what's been just completed and what's happening next. So this 10-year plan is to be completed by 2028. It was really, as I said, sparked by the Kinder Foundation's generous gift, and will lead us to the areas that are in blue that are master plan priorities of the Eastern Glade, which is open to the public, the relocated ball fields and parking lots to the north that are completed, the memorial groves that I mentioned that are upcoming, and then that large central area of both gold and pale blue are the Land Bridge and Prairie project, with the running trail complex improvements, track, and parking that are forthcoming. So you'll see all this in blow-ups of plans in the next slides. Next, please. The Eastern Glade was really a thrill to trigger this as the first project from the master plan to be built. And many thanks again to the Kinder Foundation and the Clay family in particular for the lead gifts, and the many, many Houstonians that contributed. There's a phenomenal number of people contributing to this first project. And I have to say, as a practitioner, the trust of getting your first piece of a master plan built is really catalytic. It builds enthusiasm and energy, and it shows we can do this. So what I'd like to point out in this slide is that the loop road and parking went right through the middle of this. So where you're seeing the new 5 acres of water, this 100 acres of I would say newly discovered park was basically unusable land with a major road and parking going through it. So we moved that road to the east, and that liberated this whole giant area. We reorganized the parking. We would have shade. We designed a beautiful extension of the Seymour Lieberman Trail that got it to 3 miles. That was a major coup. Everybody was aching for that in the public process. But then we inserted these design elements that are clues. I would say they're landscapes that ask a question. They ask the public a question, like, what are these gates and monuments and piers, and what are they telling me? And so in this way, we are reminding people of the layered history and uses of this site. In particular, on this axis, this was the historic gate to Camp Logan. Next, please. This is a working plan. This was our rendering where you can see the road was moved to the far right. The outer loop trail continues. The Seymour Lieberman Trail actually goes around this large elliptical grove. And then there's a large terrace, an overlook, and a new pond that captures stormwater and supplies irrigation water. There is a series of 2 restroom buildings and a series of picnic pavilions and shelters, all inspired by the language of World War I barracks and those structures. So again, even these are contemporary buildings by English architects. That's the name of the firm. And they're not British, they're American, but based in Houston, to recall in a contemporary way these historic structures. To the left, you're also seeing trails that go through the wetlands, showcasing this important ecosystem. So it brings up an interesting concept that I'd just like to toss out to our listeners today. And that is sort of redefining the way we talk about nature. I think all of us, anybody on this call who believes in Scenic Mornings and Scenic Houston's mission, cares about nature. And we all say we love nature. But what is natural in our lives is often constructed. This is a place that was creatively envisioned and imagined. It didn't appear out of thin air. It was laboriously developed and drawn and redrawn and redrawn and redrawn in collaboration with engineers and scientists and historians to create something completely new. And yes, it's made of paths and water and trees and plants and grass. So it is nature, but I just challenge that idea that it's natural. And I think that's an interesting way to think about our parks and public space. They do require tending in a way that the Memorial Park Conservancy has embraced and invested in, and they are tending this constructed wild. So I think the tended wild and the constructed wild has been a theme of Memorial Park, but I think the giant scale of this geometry makes me feel like this is the living room of Houston. It's a welcoming open space for passive recreation. And from the day it opened, unfortunately during COVID, everyone knew how to use it. They intuitively, Shelley, I hope you'll agree. I think you'll agree because you shoot me texts a lot saying like, oh my gosh, you won't believe this amazing family is here. And they told me these stories about people arriving to this space and immediately understanding how to use it and loving the amenity. So let's look at a few pictures of the construction. Next, please. This is, again, that idea of constructed nature, not just naturalization, but you see the arcs through the parking lot. The snow just revealed the design in such a crisp way. I love this image. You can see the stormwater swales are arcing through the parking lots. That's taking the water, cleaning it with plants, allowing it to infiltrate back into the ground plane and not all rush to the bayou. You're seeing the lawn areas in white and all of these motts of preserved trees and replanted forest patches. And then you're seeing this long axis all the way to Camp Logan, the historic entrance. So this photograph really captures what I'm trying to communicate of the power of design within nature to capture cultural stories and ecological stories. Next, please. A few zoomed in images, thousands and thousands of emergent wetland plants enrich the ecosystem of Memorial Park now thanks to this new lake. The Hines Lake, a really spectacular new jewel in this part of the park where no lake existed. Next. Here's an image of the boardwalk that we designed from concept, actually from our first interview all the way through construction administration. Jeff Ayton, an associate principal at Nelson Bird Woltz, has been leading this team and has done an outstanding job along with Jeremy Jordan and Kate Tabany and Taryn Jensvold, who was overseeing a lot of the installation construction. So a big shout out to our MBW team that involved many more people, but that group was really leadership and looking at the details of the benches and the handrails and the decking and all of the planting plans. I have to honor these incredible colleagues who have brought this place to life. Next, please. You can see the detailing and the fluidity of this boardwalk. Is this natural? No, it's a constructed landscape, but it allows you to be immersed in nature, immersed in the wetland. And trees actually, bald cypress actually planted in the water in their natural ecosystem. And this leads you to boardwalks through the wetlands. Next, please. Here you see people enjoying these, and this is that ground level immersion in this ecosystem. Next. People enjoying the sort of amphitheater seating that looks back across the Hines Lake to the plaza. Next. The abundant wildlife that has returned. I get anecdotal evidence from our friends at Memorial Park Conservancy of the different wildlife that is now thriving in this part of the park. Next. Oh, just another great image. Next, please.
I'll actually jump in and add with this. So we one of the objectives of the master plan is to create greater biodiversity in the park, bring wildlife back that may not be here anymore. This is an example of wildlife that has not been seen inside of urban Houston before. These are least grebes. And right after the lake was constructed and the wetlands were planted, a nesting pair came and had their 5 babies, and they've come back again this year and had some more. And so this was a major early win for biodiversity in the park, and it was discovered by the Audubon Society on one of the bird counts.
So this is, I guess, Shelley, an example of build it and they will come.
It's
but for
exactly
wildlife.
what this is.
So, the fact that, next slide, please. The fact that the response of humans and animals has been so extraordinary has been a real thrill for us to watch. Shelley, will you go to the next image, please? We wanted also to trigger the curiosity of our visitors to the park. That sorry, back one if you can. There's some little sort of secret surprises, and that one, I don't know if there's a delay or lag, but if you can, this waterfall area is where the water cascades in, and each of these blocks has a different elevation number, so you can tell how high the lake is, up or down the water level. So you can read, like, after a big rainstorm, all of these will be underwater, and it gets up to 53.5, and then in drought it starts to descend. So you start to be able to learn about and measure the dynamics of nature. So in a way, the designed landscape is a tool for measuring the ecology that you're enjoying as a park user. So this is a great place to just mention, when sometimes people say, oh, I heard you were involved in restoring Memorial Park. I'm like, yes, but actually there are all these new things that never existed before that are newly designed creative interventions that bring a lot more richness and give us a lens to see the nature of this urban wilderness. Now let's turn to the Land Bridge and Prairie project, which is under construction. Any of you living in Houston who have driven by have seen this. The team, again, with Jeff Ayton leading, have worked very, very hard with the engineering team and Uptown to assure the flow of traffic during construction. We knew that to close down Memorial would be a real mess. And so making sure that we could build this project took a fantastic collaboration between engineers and designers. So here we are. This is the vision. You're seeing 2 sets of 2 tunnels that create 2 land bridges that basically have this idea of a wet prairie lifting up to dry prairie and crossing Memorial Park, which is a 6-lane highway. I remember trying to cross it myself on early site visits and feeling like the old video game Frogger, that you're just lucky if you can make it through that. So the idea of using a lost native ecology to solve this connectivity problem was a really exciting epiphany for our firm. And no one wants to hear this, but drought will come again to Houston. And as we've seen since this project started, floods will come again to Houston. So our thought was, let's invest in the most powerfully resilient ecologies that have thrived for thousands of years, thrived when the Native Americans were here, thrived through ancient Texas, has had wet and dry prairie, post oak savanna, hardwood and pine forest for thousands of years. So let's invest in those as the most resilient structures for absorbing the inevitable extremes of climate that we are seeing more and more. So you can imagine that this is also for people. So the high point over these bridges are allowing incredible views to uptown and downtown. And you're seeing at the bottom of this slide, in front of the closer elevated meadow, you're seeing what we call the scramble, which is a rock, like a kind of rock workout place where you can scramble up the rocks, or you can take the path back and forth, all of which is accessible for universal accessibility. In the distance, you're seeing the wet prairie, And this is incredible. Like native Texas prairie can absorb up 6 to 8 inches of rainwater an hour. So this is the best solution for absorbing and holding storm water to help reduce flooding. If we had more patches of this kind of sponge prairie, we support pollinators, we support wildlife. It is beautiful. It is slow to establish, but once established, it's a powerful ecosystem. Next, please. You can probably tell I'm pretty excited about this project. Here is an aerial of the plan. You can see how the tunnels work to have 2 sets of tunnels so that you're briefly underground, you come out into the light, and you go back into the second set of tunnels. And the stormwater from the northern half of the park moves under these bridges. So you have this incredibly layered ecology of water below, highway above, meadow and prairie above that. So it's this stacked, layered human and natural ecology. In the lower left, you're seeing the parking area and then where the running trail center is going to be built in an upcoming phase. Next, please. And again, these paths are not pretending to be natural. They're the geometry is very carefully laid out, beautiful arcs and offering vistas as you move up and down. And this drawing shows you the complexity of this design and the care of the grading and drainage. And this is what landscape architects do. Like we design the human experience in the out of doors. But you can see the geometry and the layout of these paths is very intentional to immerse people in this ecosystem, keep them oriented, and give them a beautiful experience. And you can also see, if you read grading, each one of those lines represents an increment of feet from one another. So when the lines are dense, you're on steep slopes, and when they're far apart, you're in flat areas. So the lower part is the wet prairie, and the upper part are the dry prairies. Next, please. This is from the video that you would have seen at the introduction that talks about the flows through the park from migratory birds, pedestrians, bikes, animals, the flow of water, and the connectivity to your community. These are all of the layers that as designers we're keeping in mind at the same time to deliver a project with this kind of complexity and scale. Next, please. So this is a view that our office created looking across this wet prairie. You can see where the water goes under Memorial, and then these beautiful long arcs of the entry to the tunnels, trying to make everything about this a beautiful experience and immerse you in this ecology. It's going to be about a 100-acre project with 45 acres, as you can see on the slide, of native Gulf Coast prairie, an ecosystem that was not previously existing in the park. I talked about the high absorbency of prairie ecology, and I didn't mention, though, the incredible power of these root systems to sequester carbon, another important contribution to mitigating climate extremes. Next, please. This is an image of how the prairie will look, and I want to really emphasize this. It's a rich ecosystem. It is a diverse ecosystem. It is not going to look like a golf course. It is also slow to establish, and I want to prepare all of my friends in Houston that there will be some rough patches at the beginning of this installation. What happens with these native grasses, part of their power of holding water, absorbing water, and sequestering carbon is that they have massive root systems. The roots can go down 10, 12 feet into the ground. So this is not your golf course fescue that has like 2 or 3 inches of roots. Imagine a 12-foot deep root system. This takes time to grow and establish, and these native prairie plants often put much of their energy in the first 2 or 3 years into those root systems, and those root systems are why they survive flood, drought, and fire. So We're building a deeply resilient ecology, but I beg for everyone's patience as it gets established, because it's not an instant installation. It's going to take some time. But we have the right partners in stewardship with the Memorial Park Conservancy. But I'm braced for people to say, oh, it doesn't look good yet. Well, it will eventually. Next, please. Also, to create this new ecosystem, it has a very large footprint. So hundreds of trees were relocated, planted in other parts of the park that support the eventual master plan as we create this new ecosystem. And the compost program that Shelley mentioned is all going to be used. A lot of that compost will be used in this project as well. One other exciting thing that the Conservancy has pioneered is collecting soils from a few remnants of native prairie, mixing that into their biocycle system to inoculate the soils that we'll use for seeding the prairie so that it already has the microbiome in the soil to support this unique ecology. So this is deep science. This is not the decoration of the outdoors. This is rebuilding an ecosystem. Next, please. Here are construction photos. You can see the bypass of Memorial staying active. You can see the highway going down, and you can see where the water drainage goes across between these tunnels. These are precast high performance concrete thin shells that carry the soil above. We were inspired when we had this idea. We were really inspired by wildlife crossings that you see in the Rocky Mountains and in Canada. But thinking, well, this is as much for people as for animals. But it was a great way to encase the road. Many people said, oh, you should just go down and under and keep the ground horizontal. But the water table in Houston is very, very high. So any excavation of this road would have flooded it. So we had to stay at the surface and build up. Next, please. Here you can see the scale of the project with the tunnels nearing completion. Next, please. Here is the conduit for the water to flow beneath and the highway to flow over. It's a very complicated and layered design. Next, please. And here are the folks from the Memorial Park Conservancy on their staff tour in July. A few tunnel frequently asked questions there. It's 35 feet tall outside, 27 feet tall inside, with 3 car lanes in each direction. There are emergency door exits should there be an incident inside the tunnel, and the surface is graffiti resistant. The next slide really shows a lot of these folks. Again, these are the folks that keep this park going. These are our friends at the Conservancy. There are many full-time staff and volunteers who understand that this is attended wild, attended nature that we have to steward. We can't just build it and walk away. That this is going to take a lot of care. Another frequently asked question is, how long are the tunnels? One set is 264 feet long, and the other set is 420 feet long. So that allows for this oculus, we call it, this coming back out into the daylight and then back into the tunnel. Next, please. So here is an image that we generated for the video that you saw at the beginning, and that was done by Chloe Nagraj, Tim Popa, David LePage, Suzanne Hurl, all from Nelson Bird Woltz Landscape Architects, our communications team, who put together this video to try to tell this story. You can see the arc, the parabolic arcs of the tunnel entries, just trying to bring beauty to this highway infrastructure. And then the gathering point at the top with this lookout that will allow you to see out over the wet prairie and see the towers of downtown and uptown Houston. Next, please. So this image is a good one for us to pause and take some questions. I think I'll turn it back over to Sarah Newberry to moderate those questions. But in this image, you're seeing the scramble, the universal accessible path that gets you up to this lookout with these benches. We hope this becomes a new community heart for Houston in this constructed wild. And again, it has been such an honor to be entrusted with the design of Memorial Park. And a huge thanks to all of the partners of the city, Parks Department, Uptown, the Kinder Foundation, and the many, many generous contributors who have supported the Memorial Park Conservancy over the past 8 years. A deep, heartfelt word of thanks to all of you. None of this could happen without this incredible, perfect storm of support.
Thank you, Thomas. I think in a moment, if everybody's still got their speaker view on, you'll be able to see our panelists as we start to take some questions here. Shelley, maybe you stop sharing your screen. And I think then, there we go. Great. Well, thank you, Shelley and Thomas. Even though I'm involved in all this, hearing both of you speak just gets me excited all over again. One great question that came in, I think you've teased everybody's interest is, are there tours available in the park? And Shelley, I think that one is something you could respond to.
Actually, Eastern Glades has a virtual tour. And so if you go onto our website, you can download a virtual tour. And also you can find so much information on our website about the park itself. And it's fun to research and learn and just view the information on the website that takes you even deeper than this presentation. We are beginning to work towards installing more informational signage so that as you're experiencing the park, we started this in Eastern Glades, you can learn on site as well. So we do have some signage as you go through the wetlands boardwalk, for example, that explains what you're seeing, and without cluttering up the site. That's what we don't want to do. But without cluttering up the site, we'll continue doing that as we open up new areas of the park, and we'll also start using more QR codes for that purpose.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because actually that was another question that had come up. And in that same vein about access and using Eastern Glades, someone also wanted to ask who they should contact if they want to hold an event at Eastern Glades.
So again, you come to the Conservancy, we will evaluate a permit request. We have picnic pavilions that you can rent. And the Conservancy's website is memorialparkconservancy.org, and you can contact us that way. Or I think you can also go through comments at memorialparkconservancy.org. And by the way, I forgot to advertise again in my section. I was supposed to say at the end, if you have questions, it's hello for this session. It's hello@scenichouston.org.
Thanks, Shelley. Thomas, I want to turn to you for a minute. So many incredible projects in the master plan, and with the 10-year plan, a really significant portion of that vision will be constructed. But for you personally, is there a particular project that you're most excited to see come? I know it's a little bit like asking someone
about their favorite child.
Right.
Well, maybe
So
people
putting you on
have
the
a
spot.
favorite child, they're just not allowed to ever say it. I will say, I mean, we do a lot of large urban parks across the United States, and as I said in my opening comments that were 100% sincere, I've never felt such a perfect storm as this support in Houston that make it all possible. So one of the most exciting aspect for me is that the high probability that this entire master plan will be implemented over time. That's just, an incredibly rare, usually people cherry pick a couple of things and then they're like, well, it's been a while. And in this case, I feel there's so much energy and momentum because maybe the thorough public input process and research process and then design make all of it feel interdependent and interconnected. Like you can't just rip out a chunk and say, we'll do that. It begs that the next, like doing the prairie, I said, well, now the running trail center was conceived with this. So now we need to do the track and the parking and the improvements running trail center, building on the living bridge that was built years ago. And then that connects to, I guess, my answer to your question, the part I'm most excited about is the memorial groves, because I think in our public process, I was struck with how few people understood that the Hogg family's motivation behind securing this land and creating the deal with the city of Houston was to remember the sacrifice of the soldiers who were trained there and served, often at the loss of their lives in World War I. And so it's not a veterans park. It's not just happened to be called Memorial Park. It had a very specific reason, and there wasn't signage or real explanation. A lot of the public didn't know why it was called Memorial Park. So the Memorial Groves will be an opportunity to really allow the public to kind of, as I often say, hold hands with history. The artifacts that are there are very modest. They're the remains of latrines and shower buildings from the camp, because remember, this was an ephemeral city of tens of thousands of soldiers in training, but it was made of canvas for the most part. So it was an entire big city made of cloth. And I find that so fascinating. And so to evoke the scale of the occupation of the soldiers and their sacrifice in some way, and tell, as Shelley mentioned in her opening comments, some of the darker histories of this landscape, it is healthy for us to confront and explain those histories. So I'm very, it's not as perhaps heroic as the Land Bridge and Prairie or the Eastern Glade, but I think it's a powerful moment to acknowledge, confront, and absorb the true histories of this landscape.
Thank you. Shelley, so we've talked a bit today about the overall master plan and focused on the 10-year plan. There will be projects remaining after the 10-year plan is complete in 2028. And I wonder if you could, the question is, what other projects are there, and are those funded? So maybe you could speak a little bit to not only what we're about to achieve, but what's still yet to come.
Sure. So we're doing well on fundraising for the 10-year plan. We still have a way to go, but we're on track. We're on a very strong track with a lot of momentum for the projects that Thomas described. There is a set of projects outside of the 10-year plan that still would, once this is executed by 2028, we'll be starting the new capital campaign and starting the new design and projects. And those include the south side, what we call bio wilds. That's 600 acres of very special land that is not accessible to very many. That has its own challenges with soil erosion, with nutrient deficient soil, with the way that the space is used. There's conflict between users, between mountain bikers and pedestrians, and then there are ways to improve it to make the experience much better for all types of users, for mountain bikers, for pedestrians. And that is full of potential. That project will be a big, very special project in the future. The northwest quadrant of the park is not part of the 10-year plan. And what is envisioned for the northwest quadrant of the park, much like Eastern Glades, but more dramatic, is the movement of, well, there's about 200 acres there that's divided right in half by Memorial Drive, just cutting it in half. And so if we
Which
can,
also divides into two separate lanes, so you've trapped land in between. It's a
right, that's right.
it's a
that's
pretty
right.
wasteful.
It's a
consumptive
terrible
road.
use of space. And it just like the other, areas, it divides the wildlife corridors. It prevents access for people. It blocks stormwater flow. I mean, there's all kinds of negatives with the way that is set up. Part of the remedy, or I should say, the remedy to some of these problems is to move Memorial Drive closer to Woodway and unite most of that space, and then create access. And what is intended for that space is to honor the original kind of equestrian use of the park, which is this northwest quadrant. Historically, that's where the remount station was during Camp Logan. That's historically where equestrian use has been, even up to now. But that space is not accessible to almost any Houstonian. And so the other intention of that space is to make it more accessible and to move high-speed cycling from Picnic Loop up to that space, to move the Bio City Art Festival and the rodeo trail ride up to that space. So it's been designed for those things, and that will be a future fundraising effort and a future design effort. And then finally, finishing out kind of the active northeast quadrant of the sports complex and the natatorium is not contemplated in this 10-year plan. I think those are the big swaths of projects that would be future projects, or that will be future projects.
Thanks, Shelley. I know we're nearing the end of our time. I have another question that came in for Thomas, and maybe you've touched on it a bit. It's broad, but Thomas, can you talk about this project compares to other projects that you've done?
I feel like over the, I guess, is it 8 years that we've been working on Memorial Park together, Sarah and Shelley? I think it's
it is.
I think it's been eight years. I think what Memorial Park has really crystallized for me is that this method of research-based design in nature works. It is a way of seeing land and listening to land before you act, before you design. You listen to the landscape stories, you study its ecology, and that ecology may not be the ecosystem you see before you. It may be the ecosystem that came long before you. And that's how, the ideas of the post oak savanna and the prairies became our palette of restoring this unhealthy landscape. So I think rather than compare and contrast different park projects, it has been an affirmation that this is a responsible methodology for designing large urban parks, because it excavates the true nature of that landscape. It excavates the unique stories of that landscape that only belong there. And what is maybe somewhat unexpected is when it's time to raise funds or tell that story, people are so engaged because they're learning about their own city. They're learning about the history of this place. And I think it inspires deep philanthropy. People are like, well, we need to steward these stories. We need to steward this ecosystem to protect our city and to provide a healthy landscape for all Houstonians. So I think, if anything, I have a sense of affirmation that this research-based approach of designing in nature works. And yeah, I think it's one of the things that my whole design team and I are most proud of our entire careers.
That kind of cues into another question, and then Shelley, I've got one for you before we wrap up. Thomas, the question was posed, can you talk a little bit more about the healthy tension between natural landscape and constructed nature? And do you feel that there is plenty of room for both in Memorial Park? And I guess I would add to that, how do you balance that tension? And is it a tension?
I was going to say, I don't think it's necessarily a tension or an opposition. I think one way to have this conversation, if we were all having dinner together, we could let this go all night. But since we're just at breakfast time, I'll keep it short. But I do think it's interesting to question what is natural. A lot of people said, oh, this was a pristine forest for centuries before. It's always been there. And it's like, well, actually, no, we have evidence through the soil that this was burned, managed by fire by the Karankawa people for hundreds of years. So it was open prairie. It's been many, many things. And was that prairie natural? It was managed by humans. It was intentionally burned to draw wildlife for hunting. Is it natural when you've paved so much of the city that you have increased flows of water? I mean, the Buffalo Bayou itself is managed water from Barker and Addicks reservoirs. The water is released before storms. So, tell me what is natural. And I think that's a fascinating conversation. So I think maybe the answer to your question, Sarah, or my, I guess, personal view on it is look at the realities of the situation. How much stormwater do we have? What is the release regime of the Barker and Addicks reservoirs? How does Houston, as we see it, function? And then what are the healthy native ecosystems that could mitigate or deal with those realities? So it's time to probably just kind of push aside this vision of pristine, undisturbed nature, because for thousands of years, people have been managing landscapes. And so now it's our turn to manage within the realities of the modern city. How do we provide the best services to people, to wildlife, to water quality and biodiversity? So it's a new kind of nature. It's a constructed wild, a tended wild, an intentional dance with nature. So I would take away the pristine, untouched versus the constructed nature. I think it's all a constructed one, but we have to do it with responsibility, with care, with science, and with patience.
I love the idea of our dance with nature. That's really beautiful. I think we have time really for just one more question. And Shelley, I'm going to put this one to you. The question is, I love the hidden storytelling as well as the historical storytelling. Are there other hidden stories throughout the park?
I think most of the stories of the park are hidden to most Houstonians. And it's not just stories of the park. A lot of the stories of the park are the stories of Houston. And so those we will unveil project by project over time. And we've started with Eastern Glades, and next we're moving to the next projects. But even the running complex, which we will be opening in 2023, that reflects the history and connection to running in the park. And this, that is a history of the park as well. It's a more modern history. But yes, there are layers and layers of stories. And I know that as Thomas and team continue their design, they'll have many more surprises for us. I have one more slide that I needed to share.
Yes,
if I can shift back. Is that the last question?
That's the last question. Thank you to everyone for sending us in.
I am trying to find my slide. There it is. I just wanted to invite this group. We have an event. It's a virtual event coming up on September 30th. It's our State of the Park. And you might wonder, it's an update on what's happening in the park. And you might wonder, well, I just sat through this. Why would I go to that? It will be a different presentation, actually. There will be some commonality, but there's new information that will soon be announced. And we'll deep dive on different topics in that presentation that some of you might find, or many of you might find very interesting. If you're interested in this topic overall, you will find that also interesting, and it'll take you down a different deep dive path. Speaking, it's kind of tied back to that question, are there other stories? Yes, there are many stories, and we will tell another one, a big one at this. So please join. We do have sponsorships available. I haven't spoken about this, but the Conservancy manages and operates the park on behalf of the city of Houston, on behalf of the citizens of Houston. It is a public park. We have to raise millions of dollars every year to do this. So it's not just the fundraising for the capital projects, it's fundraising for operating the park 365 days a year. We have 60 staff members, and we do the care for 1,100 acres of the park. So please support us when you can. Come to this event, or even better, sponsor this event. And so here is a little more information about this event. But thank you to Scenic Houston for giving us this venue today to tell the stories, and to Thomas and team for the wonderful design. I mean, that's just an understated word. And to Sarah and the Kinder Foundation for the partnership and leadership that they provide on this project and so much in Houston. And then to our other partners as well, at Uptown Development Authority, at the Parks Department, and then to you who do support us. There are some of you on this call who I'm sure support us already. Thank you to all of our generous donors, and come be a part of our organization if you're not already. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you myself. And Heather, I think you wanted to say a few words before people sign off. So back to you.
Yes.
Shelley, sharing your screen. There we
Yes,
go.
I did. And I had a couple of slides that I'm just going to show at the end as well. But thank you, Shelley Arnold and Thomas Woltz. I think we can all agree that the work you guys are doing in Memorial Park is greatly improving all of our quality of life in Houston and really putting our city on the map. I mean, as one of the best green spaces in the country, I can imagine that once this is done, it will attract visitors from all over the world. So thank you so much for all the work you are doing to improve our lives here in the city that we love so much. And Thomas, how lucky we are to have your talent and design and presence in Houston. You mentioned a dinner party just a minute ago, and I think most of us on this call would be thrilled to be at a dinner party with you to listen to you talk about this all night. It is fascinating, and I'm so thankful that all of you joined us today. Thank you, Sarah. You're a wonderful moderator, and we're so honored to have you today. Thank you again to our sponsors from C3 Building Solutions, Mad Rat Beverages, and Vision Property. We're so glad that you helped us out today. And definitely, last but not least, we definitely want to thank all of our board members and advisory board members who joined us today. Without all your support and work, none of this would be possible. I have another slide I'd like to share. If you could go to the next one. We hope you can join us for our next Scenic Mornings. It's on October 13th. It features panelists Jay Maddock from Texas A&M University, Sheila Condon from Clark Condon Landscape Design, and Jaime Gonzalez from the Nature Conservancy, all good friends of Scenic Houston's, and I'm sure the parks as well, Memorial Parks as well. The subject is building a healthier Houston through nature. It should be a really enlightening and engaging discussion. We hope you can join us. We also have our annual dinner coming up this fall on November 2nd, honoring the incredible Dick Weekly as our scenic visionary. And for all of those who subscribe to our newsletter, you'll be getting a lot of information about these two things from us. And thank you so much for joining us today and for supporting Scenic Houston. These events help us highlight all the good work that's being done in Houston, from Memorial Park to all the beautiful parks and the bayous in Houston. And it helps us highlight our own work as well. If you are not already a supporter of Scenic Houston, we'd love to have you. We're doing great work, and we're all working together to improve quality of life here in this great city. You can go to our website it's right on the screen to donate. And that's it. And thank you again for joining us, and have a beautiful Tuesday. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Heather. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.